Before I begin, it's only fair to tell you we'll be talking about the final few minutes of 28 years later in this review. Time codes for where any spoilers are discussed are enclosed below. You have been warned. This week, myself and my wife went to see the latest in the 28 Days Later series. Now, I wasn't intending to review it. I just wanted to go out and see a new movie. And after all, the critical world and its mother will have an opinion by now. But after watching it and seeing an ending that is so left of field, I have to give my opinion. 28 years later. So, what did I think? In an alternate 2030, 28 years after the rage virus struck Great Britain, leaving the country in a state of permanent quarantine where no one can leave, 12-year-old Spike, played by Alfie Williams, is taken by his father Jamie, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, from the safety of their isolated community on the island of Lindisfarne to the mainland on a coming-of-age expedition where Spike will learn hard lessons, not only about the world, but his own family. Now, 28 years later is pretty much critically bulletproof. I'm sure you've all seen the glowing reviews praising the film by now. And you know what? They're right.
Mostly.
Director Danny Boyle and screenwriter Alex Garland have managed to explain away the doom-laden ending that had been established in 28 weeks later. Instead, creating an at times thoughtful, almost literary science fiction film. Take the community of survivors on Lindisfarne. Boyle, through the use of cutaways and newsreel footage, makes them into the very personification of the cosy catastrophe prevalent in British science fiction of the 1950s, in particular the works of John Wyndham, whose Day of the Triffids so obviously was an influence on the original 28 Days Later.
Hello?
With moments of pure cinematic poetry and nightmare. In particular, two scenes involving Jodie Comer as Spike's dying mother, Isla, slipping in and out of lucidity with fevered recollections of the first time she saw the sculpture of the Angel of the North, to the ferocity she reveals in protecting Spike from the infected. And Comer's performance isn't even the strongest in what is admittedly a flawless cast. Ralph Fiennes is apparently enjoying himself playing Dr. Kelso, a GP who survived the outbreak and has developed a unique method of coping with the insanity of this new world. But the film belongs to Alfie Williams, playing the 12-year-old Spike. Williams carries the entire film on his shoulders, a performance from someone so young in a way I have not seen since Jamie Bell in Billy Elliot. But unlike the cast, the screenplay is far from flawless. The original terror of 28 Days Later came from the fact that the infected had been ordinary people, decent people, who, exposed to just one drop of infected blood, became blood-crazed lunatics. This was a fable telling us how thin the line is between civilization and chaos. But now, the infected are more reminiscent of the fast-moving zombies that have dominated genre cinema for the past 2 decades, and whose inspiration was ironically 28 Days Later. With a multitude of variations, including ridiculously overpowered alphas, 7 foot tall and able to take 12 arrows to the chest, capable of ripping a man's head clean off his shoulders, simply using its bare hands. With sequences we have seen before and done better, in films from A Quiet Place to Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. Which is not to say 28 years later doesn't work, but instead of being as promised in the trailers, a disturbing terror-filled sequel, what we get is a moving story of a boy's journey into adulthood as he struggles not only with the crazed infected, but the pain of death, loss, and moving past childhood. And it was genuinely turning for me into one of the most haunting and elegiac films of the year. Until... See, this is meant to be the first part of a new trilogy, and at the start of the film, we return to 2002 and the beginning of the outbreak, Boyle and Garland introduce us to a young boy called Jimmy, who, with his cousins, watch the Teletubbies in terrified silence as chaos rages in the streets outside, and his mother and aunts desperately try to keep the infected out, but they fail, with Jimmy, the only survivor, fleeing into the countryside. We do not see Jimmy again for the next 90 minutes, but his name is graffiti on the walls of abandoned buildings or carved into the bodies of those left to be infected as punishment. It is only in the last 5 minutes of the film that we are reintroduced to a now adult Jimmy, played by Jack O'Connell, as he and his gang of warriors called the Jimmies meet Spike. Now, I have seen American critics assume that these tracksuit-attired warriors who use a ridiculous mixture of parkour, kung fu, and obvious wire fighting
prepare for the ultimate wire fighting maneuver
to defeat the infected, all without getting a speck of blood on themselves, are a reference to the Teletubbies Jimmy was watching just before his family died. But to British and Irish cinema audiences of a certain age, the Jimmy's gaudy tracksuits, white peroxide hair, and gold rings on every finger, with Jimmy referring to himself as Sir Jimmy, is a reference to a far greater monster, Jimmy Savile. And for any viewers from outside the British Isles who may be unaware who Savile is, please feel free to Google the name, as I daren't list his crimes here lest I get a strike from YouTube.
I'm fine, I just threw up in my mouth a little bit.
Why Boyle and Garland have decided to end the film on such a scene is known only to them. Now, perhaps the next film in the series, to be released in 2026, will astonish us with its story. And perhaps they wanted an ending that would have the audience asking, what's next? But the scene takes what had been a moving story on life, loss and grieving and turns it into a mixture of a Planet of the Apes sequel from the 1970s and Hammer's Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires. And the only question I heard from the audience as we left the theatre was, what the hell was that? I'm not sure if that is exactly the reaction Boyle and Garland were hoping for.
Order! Order! Order!
knock it off
28 years later is, for 95% of the time it's on screen, an interesting, sometimes moving entry into the growing series. I will say go watch it, but be prepared for that ending that will leave you scratching your head and asking, what were they thinking?
are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
And if you like this episode of So What Did I Think and want to see more, please remember to click like and subscribe. Always subscribe. Thanks for watching.